Today, I'm going to talk to you about what are the SharePoint language settings. There are a large number of settings in SharePoint that affect what language your SharePoint site is going to be viewed in. There are some that affect just the language of the user interface, and there's some that just affect the language of the content. But before we do any of that, you have to understand that for any of these languages to be affected, first, the site itself must support that language. Doesn't matter what your own user settings are, the site itself has to have some settings so that you have the ability to change your language to that language. So we're going to talk about the two scenarios. One is the site settings with multilingual page publishing, and the other one is without. So we'll go to the site settings first. There's first site information, then click on View All Site Settings. And these settings are here under site administration. There's something called language settings. And one set of settings which applies all the time is these advanced settings. If you expand on the advanced settings, that is going to show you the languages that are supported for the site. When you create a site, it may already support all languages or it may support no languages. So we'll just expand that and we'll see that in this case, it's already been set up so that without multilingual page publishing feature turned on, there's a certain number of languages that are available, that are supported. To turn on the multilingual page publishing feature, it's not like a regular feature. It is this slider over here that says enable translation into multiple languages. So I'm going to turn that on so that you'll see there's a different menu that allows you to add or remove languages from the site. It is essentially the same settings in the end, but if you have multilingual page publishing, then these are the languages. This is the way that you add or remove languages, and it affects the same settings. So let's go back, and we're not going to save any of these changes. Let's go back and look at the site, and we'll see what are some of the other settings or personal settings that can affect the languages of your site. There is one setting which is associated with this toggle. There's a language toggle here when you have multilingual page publishing enabled, which lets you go to one site or the other and set a preference. This is a setting for your content language preference. So you'll see here I've changed my content language preference to see Dutch content, but the user interface, anything in the menus up here, down here, those are still in English. So that setting has affected only my content language. And it's a temporary setting. It's a cookie. It's a cookie called site_lang_pref, which is set. It is a session cookie so that it disappears when the session ends. But while that session is going on, it's going to affect not just this page, but any other page on this site is going to show up in that language. So I'll go back to English and I'll show you the other more powerful settings which affect both the user interface and content language. So there are two different levels that you have to look at. One is called the profile settings, and the other one is the account settings. Profile settings affect SharePoint and a few SharePoint-like components. Account settings affects a lot more M365 components. So let's look at the profile settings first. So here is my Microsoft 365 profile, and we'll click on that. So here we are, and here this is a Delve page, but Delve is being retired, but there'll still be a way to update the profile. So I'll click on Update Profile, and what that is going to show me is a confusing page. It says nothing directly about language, but it's there. You can expand this. How do I change language regional settings? Click on the Here button, click on the three dots, and there's something saying language and region. There are several different region and language type things. The only one which is really important is the display languages here, and here my display language is English. You can have multiple display languages, but I just want to change my display language. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down and change my language to French. By the way, there's lots of different versions of French, lots of different languages, most of which are not supported by SharePoint at all. They're in the menu, but they're not supported. So pick one of the ones that SharePoint does support. I only want to have one language. I'll delete English. We'll just have French. That avoids the complexities of it deciding which of the two to choose when there are two. And then it gives you this message saying it may take some time to take effect. And it's going to take 15, 20 minutes, sometimes an hour to take effect. So we are going to come back. Let's have a look at the account, not the profile, but the account. This is a different language setting which lives in your M365 profile. And so that will indirectly affect your SharePoint language, but it will also affect the language of other M365 components, other products. So let's go look at settings and privacy, and somewhere in there are 3 language settings. They are interrelated, and only the first one matters. The other 2 don't affect SharePoint at all. They barely affect other products. And they tend to update themselves anyway, so you don't need to update them. But I have a display language here, which is English, United States. And for the purpose of showing what it's like, while we're waiting for our language update to French, we're going to start a new update, and we're going to start an update to Dutch. Let's search for Dutch. And when you update your display language in your account, after 15 minutes or so, it's going to update your profile language preferences, which themselves, once updated, another 15 minutes or half an hour after that, is then going to affect SharePoint. So it's a very long process. It is telling you here in Dutch that you should log out and log back in. That will make it go a little bit faster, but it's still going to take a fair bit of wait. So I'm going to sign out. I'm going to shut things down, and then we'll come back. So now we're back. We're logged back in, and we see that the language has changed to Dutch at the account level. We can see whether it has propagated to that language. We can see that it has added Dutch to my list of preferred display languages, which doesn't really matter. There's one preferred language, and that will also have propagated to the profile. Let's go and look at the profile and go back to where we were. We'll update the profile, see the regional settings, and see what it says there. I think right at the moment it will still say French. It still says French, but 15 minutes from now, it's going to say Dutch. So we'll wait for the French is still propagating down to the sites. Let's have a look at the site and see whether French is propagated down to the site. And then if we wait even longer, Dutch will have propagated down to the site. So let's go look at the site. So we'll reload the page. We see both the user interface and the content in French, which is what somebody would see the first time if they hadn't tried to use that drop-down language menu, which is why it's a good idea to discourage people from using that drop-down language menu. It has unexpected effects. Even I get confused in terms of what language it's going to show me next. It's better not to use it at all. Reload the page. And again, we see a mismatch between the user interface, which is now in Dutch, and the display language, which is still in French. So let's switch to the display language being Dutch. So here we have the entire page is in Dutch. User interface is in Dutch. The content is in Dutch. We have the 2 synchronized. So this is how you change your language in SharePoint. By the way, in your profile, one of the things that you can do is if you select no language in your profile, then what it's going to do is follow the language preference of your browser to have yet another setting come to affect this. But typically you will have a language selected in your profile, so that will always override your browser. By the way, let's look at PointFire 365. While we're here, PointFire 365 has a different way of selecting language. It's very quick and it's synchronized user interface and content language. I'm going to switch my language from Dutch to English on this particular site. And it's just a matter of a couple of seconds and everything is changed immediately to your selected language. No waiting half an hour, no shutting down the browser. Thank you.